The Vikings are often remembered as fierce warriors, ruthless conquerors, and seafarers who plundered, raided, and brought terror to much of Europe. But beneath their reputation for bloodshed lies a deeper and more complex culture, one that engaged in rituals and ceremonies designed to connect the living to the divine and the living to the dead. These rituals were often violent, intense, and profoundly meaningful to the Norse people. Among the most chilling of these practices were their blood rituals, which sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Today, we'll uncover the mysteries surrounding Viking blood rituals, how they were conducted, their purpose, and the impact they had on the societies they encountered. Let's dive into a world where sacrifice, spirituality, and brutality were interwoven in ways that few can truly comprehend. If you're fascinated by Viking history and want to learn more about their rituals, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the ancient world. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always great to hear from history buffs around the globe. One of the most infamous Viking rituals was the Blót, a sacrifice made to the gods. This ritual was deeply rooted in Norse mythology and the belief that the gods required offerings of blood to maintain harmony in the world. The Vikings believed that the gods had to be appeased through acts of devotion, and blood was seen as the most potent offering. The Blót was not just a casual offering, it was a community event, sometimes held in large wooden halls, where participants would gather, often in the spring or fall. At the heart of the ritual was the sacrifice of animals and sometimes people. These sacrifices were intended to honor the gods, seeking blessings for good harvests, victories in battle, and protection from the elements. The largest and most important blot was the Yule Blot, held during the winter solstice. This festival marked the rebirth of the sun and was essential for ensuring that the sun would return in the spring. The Viking settlers in what is now Sweden and Norway used the ritual as a way to reconnect with the gods, secure their livelihoods, and strengthen the bonds within their communities. The Vikings believed that blood carried life energy. It was not just the physical sacrifice that mattered, it was the life force within the blood that was seen as vital to ensure the gods' favor. Sometimes these offerings were made through the sacrifice of livestock, cattle, pigs, and sheep, while at other times more human offerings were made, especially during times of war or crisis. It's important to note that these human sacrifices were often seen as acts of honor, rather than brutality, to those who participated, as they were believed to secure the safety and prosperity of the living. As Europe became increasingly Christianized, the violent nature of Viking rituals often clashed with the growing monotheistic beliefs. The Vikings' reverence for blood sacrifice was a central point of contention with Christian missionaries and leaders. For the Vikings, blood wasn't just a symbol of life, it was the medium through which the divine could be reached and the gods could be petitioned. These rituals weren't limited to the early Viking Age. Even during the height of Viking expansion in the 9th and 10th centuries, blots continued to play a significant role in Viking culture. It was during these times that the Vikings began to establish settlements and kingdoms in places like England, Ireland, and Normandy. Their reputation as fierce warriors was compounded by the fear of their blood rituals. In the northern reaches of Scandinavia, Viking blood rituals were tied to death, warfare, and the afterlife. One of the most gruesome aspects of Viking religion was the practice of blots during battles. As warriors went to war, they would call upon the gods for victory. A warrior's sacrifice to the gods in the heat of battle often included their own blood, which was offered in a ritualistic form as part of the victory they sought. There were also cases where Viking leaders offered themselves or their warriors to the gods, seeing it as a sacred pact. The most notorious of these pacts was known as the King's Blood Oath, wherein a king or warrior pledged his blood and the blood of his people to the gods in exchange for protection, wealth, and power. This could even include the symbolic act of cutting a vein or slitting the throat of a sacrificial animal as part of the ceremonial rites. One of the more gruesome aspects of Viking rituals was their practice of sacrificial hanging. According to ancient texts, the Vikings believed that the tree of life, Yggdrasil, was the axis around which all of existence rotated. The gods used this tree to bind the cosmos together, and it was through this tree that Odin, the chief god, sought knowledge. To gain wisdom, Odin hung himself from the branches of Yggdrasil, piercing himself with his own spear, and sacrificing his own blood in the process. This act of self-sacrifice became an iconic symbol for the Vikings. Leaders and warriors would often perform similar self-hanging rituals to honor Odin and invoke his power. These rituals were not only acts of worship, but also opportunities to prove one's worthiness to the gods. In particular, Viking burial rites were often infused with blood rituals. These ceremonies could include animal and human sacrifices, and the blood was believed to carry the soul of the deceased to the afterlife. The Vikings believed that the blood of the sacrificed individual would ensure that their journey to Valhalla, the Viking afterlife, was secure, granting them a place among the gods. As Christianity slowly crept across Europe, the Norse people's blood rituals became increasingly controversial. Christian missionaries, like Saint Ansgar, tried to convert the Vikings by preaching against their violent rites. The Vikings, however, resisted and saw their blood rituals as integral to their spiritual beliefs. The legendary saga of the Viking king Olaf Tryggvason details his efforts to eradicate paganism through force, eventually converting Norway to Christianity in the early 11th century. His brutal approach to ending the Blót rituals was considered both a victory for Christianity and a tragic loss for Viking spiritual practices. The Viking blood rituals weren't just about slaughter, they were about making connections. They were about ensuring that the divine would continue to favor the living. It wasn't merely about brutality. It was about devotion, sacrifice, and seeking favor in an uncertain world. Though these rites have long since been abandoned, they remain a fascinating aspect of Viking culture, one that highlights the complex relationships the Norse had with their gods, their warriors, and the natural world. As we continue to uncover the hidden rituals of the Vikings, it's important to note the vast difference in cultural perspectives on what was considered a sacrifice or an offering. For the Vikings, these rituals were an intrinsic part of their beliefs and were woven into the fabric of their social and political structures. To them, blood was not simply a physical substance. It was the very essence of life, the energy that connected their world to the divine realm. Unlike other cultures, where sacrifices were often isolated events, Viking blood rituals were interwoven with their daily lives, their wars, and even their leadership. The act of offering blood in rituals wasn't confined to a distant and impersonal act. It was a communal, ritualized event that involved not just warriors, but kings, priests, and even ordinary citizens. It was, in many ways, an act of connection, a way to reach beyond the material world and ensure the gods' protection, favor, and blessings for their families and their communities. One of the most fascinating and chilling accounts of Viking blood rituals comes from the infamous Odin's hanged sacrifice, a symbolic representation of the depths of Viking spiritual belief. Odin, the god who presided over war, wisdom, and death, was known to have hanged himself from the sacred tree Yggdrasil, piercing himself with his own spear in an act of self-sacrifice. His purpose? To gain ultimate wisdom and mastery over the runes, the secret symbols that held the power to control fate itself. This act of self-sacrifice wasn't just symbolic. It served as a model for Viking leaders and warriors who believed that in order to gain favor with the gods, they too must offer something of great personal value. The idea of a warrior offering himself to the gods through bloodshed, whether in battle or through a sacrificial ritual, was seen as a way to demonstrate one's devotion to the divine, as well as their willingness to embrace death in the pursuit of glory and honor. This concept of self-sacrifice extended beyond Odin's personal offering. Many Viking kings and warriors sought to emulate Odin by performing rituals where they bled in the service of the gods. The offering of blood was believed to strengthen the bond between the mortal and divine realms, ensuring that their legacy would continue to echo through time. Take, for example, the practice of the berserkers, elite Viking warriors who were said to channel the power of Odin himself during battle. These warriors, often depicted as frenzied and ferocious, were known to enter a trance-like state where they fought without fear, as if their very blood had been imbued with the power of the gods. But their ferocity wasn't just physical, it was deeply spiritual. It was believed that their bloodlust was a form of ritual sacrifice to Odin, a channeling of the god's strength to secure victory and honor. The berserkers weren't the only warriors who engaged in these practices. Warriors from all walks of Viking life believed that their battles were sacred. In fact, many of the Viking raids, particularly those targeting monasteries and other Christian sites, were seen as acts of divine retribution, an effort to punish the enemies of their gods. And in this context, the blood spilled on the battlefield was seen as both a sacrifice and a plea for Odin's favor. The Vikings didn't see their battles as mere conquests. They were religious wars, an extension of their blood rituals. But the practice of blood sacrifice wasn't always about gaining favor in battle. Some of the most brutal and profound rituals involved human sacrifice, particularly in the case of royal or high-status individuals. A powerful king or chieftain on his deathbed would often offer his most trusted warriors as sacrifices to ensure his safe passage into the afterlife, as well as to secure the prosperity of his kingdom. These human sacrifices were thought to guarantee that the spirits of the deceased would watch over the living and protect them in times of need. One of the most well-documented Viking rituals involving human sacrifice took place in the ancient temple of Uppsala, Sweden. Here, it is believed that once every 9 years, a grand Blót was held, where sacrifices were made to the gods. According to the sagas, a vast number of animals were slaughtered, but the most shocking detail was that human sacrifices were also made. Captives, often slaves or prisoners of war, were offered in the hope that the gods would provide the needed protection and blessings. These sacrifices were sometimes carried out in a gruesome manner, as victims were hung, drowned, or even disemboweled as part of the ritual. These acts were not viewed as atrocities by the Vikings but as necessary and even sacred tasks to ensure the continued favor of the gods. It's a difficult concept for us today, where bloodshed in the name of religion or faith is seen as cruel and barbaric. However, for the Vikings, it was a deeply spiritual practice, one that was part of their broader worldview, where life and death were inextricably linked, and the cycle of sacrifice ensured that the gods remained active in their world. While Viking blood rituals may seem shocking by modern standards, they were part of a much larger and more complex religious system that sought to maintain a balance between the divine and mortal worlds. The sacrifices were not seen as meaningless violence but as necessary acts of devotion that bridged the gap between the gods and the living. As the Vikings began to transition into the Christian era, these rituals were slowly phased out. However, their legacy lives on in the sagas and in the archaeological finds that continue to reveal the depths of Viking spirituality. Today, when we look back at Viking blood rituals, we're reminded not only of their brutality but of their deep connection to faith, nature, and the gods they believed shaped their world. As we wrap up our deep dive into Viking blood rituals, it's clear that these ancient ceremonies weren't just about bloodshed for the sake of violence. They were an intricate part of Viking culture, woven into their worldview, their connection with the gods, and their understanding of life and death. The ritualistic use of blood wasn't just an offering. It was a key element in a system that tied together their spirituality, their social structure, and their relationship with the forces of nature. One of the most fascinating aspects of these rituals was the belief in the sacredness of sacrifice. For the Vikings, sacrifice wasn't just a way to appease the gods. It was a way to maintain balance in a world that was seen as unpredictable, harsh, and unforgiving. In their belief system, blood was a direct connection to life's energy, the very essence of existence. Whether it was the blood of animals or humans, it was a medium that transcended the physical realm and entered the divine. The complex relationship between the living and the gods in Viking culture is something that sets their rituals apart from many other ancient belief systems. The Vikings didn't just pray for victory or harvest. They made sacrifices that they believed would directly influence their fate. In their raids, the bloodshed wasn't merely about conquest. It was about securing favor in a dangerous world where survival wasn't guaranteed. They made these sacrifices in the hope that their gods, especially Odin, Thor, and Freya, would grant them the strength, protection, and fortune they needed to thrive in an unforgiving environment. Take the infamous Blót rituals, for example. These weren't just simple acts of offering. They were full, immersive experiences that brought together the entire community. They were opportunities for Vikings to come together in a shared religious experience, solidifying their bonds as a people and reaffirming their connection to the divine. The rituals often involved feasting, music, and ceremonies, where the blood of sacrificed animals was poured on altars or smeared on sacred idols. It wasn't just the warriors who participated. Everyone in the community, from leaders to commoners, took part in these rituals. The blood was not only a symbol of sacrifice but also a sign of unity, binding the community together in their devotion to the gods. While the Vikings often depicted themselves as a people bound by warrior values, their belief in the sacredness of blood rituals was a reminder that their culture was far more nuanced. They were deeply spiritual, driven not just by a desire for glory in battle, but by a need to ensure that their world remained in harmony with the forces they believed governed life and death. Their respect for the cycle of life and death, and their understanding of the role blood played in that cycle, was a cornerstone of their belief system. Even as the Vikings began to transition from paganism to Christianity in the 11th century, the legacy of these blood rituals endured. While many of the violent and sacrificial practices faded, the cultural shift didn't completely erase the sacredness of blood in Viking society. Christianity itself eventually absorbed some of the more symbolic aspects of Viking rituals, transforming them into new religious practices that reflected both the old and the new. For example, the idea of offering sacrifices to God in exchange for blessings remained central to the Christian faith, albeit in a less literal form than the Blóts of old. But even as the Vikings adopted new religious beliefs, the echoes of their old rituals can still be heard in their art, literature, and storytelling. The sagas, which have survived to this day, offer glimpses into their belief systems and provide insight into the importance of rituals in shaping the culture of Viking society. Many of the Norse myths, such as the story of Odin's sacrifice on Yggdrasil or the tales of warriors who fought valiantly for a place in Valhalla, are a direct reflection of their understanding of sacrifice and the role of blood in the divine order. One of the most enduring aspects of Viking rituals is the belief that death wasn't the end. It was simply a transition to another world. For the Vikings, the afterlife was a place where warriors could continue their lives in a realm of eternal honor and glory, especially in Valhalla, Odin's great hall. But the path to Valhalla wasn't just about living a noble life. It was about making the right sacrifices, offering the gods what they desired, and proving one's worth in battle and in life. The Viking practice of bloodletting in battle, where warriors would charge into the fray without fear, often with the belief that they were being guided by Odin himself, is one of the most iconic images of Viking warriors. But behind the chaos of battle and the bloodshed, there was a deeper spiritual purpose. The warriors believed that in sacrificing themselves in battle, they were ensuring that they would join Odin in Valhalla, a place of eternal honor where they could feast and fight in the company of gods. But it wasn't just about the warriors. The women of Viking society were also intertwined with these blood rituals, albeit in ways that are often less discussed. Women played a crucial role in Viking religious life, often acting as priestesses and participants in rituals. In some cases, women themselves were the objects of sacrifice, offering their blood in service to the gods in the hopes of ensuring the prosperity of their families and their lands. In other cases, women would serve as symbolic sacrifices, ensuring the safe passage of the warriors into the afterlife. These practices, while controversial by today's standards, were an integral part of the Viking worldview, where both men and women were seen as essential players in the cosmic balance between life and death. The Vikings, as much as they are remembered for their fierceness in battle and their raids on the Christian world, were also a people deeply connected to their spiritual beliefs. Their blood rituals were an essential part of their identity, driving everything from their military conquests to their daily lives. They believed that by shedding blood, they could influence the fate of their world, secure their place in the afterlife, and ensure that their gods remained active in their lives. Today, the Viking blood rituals stand as a reminder of a time when human life was intimately tied to the divine, where blood wasn't just a physical substance but a gateway to the gods. These rituals may seem brutal to us, but they were part of a belief system that gave meaning to the harsh realities of Viking life. They remind us that, even in the darkest moments of history, there are deep spiritual connections that shape the way people live, fight, and die. As we reflect on these rituals and the lives they shaped, it's clear that Viking blood rituals were much more than acts of violence. They were acts of devotion, sacrifice, and honor. They were an essential part of the Viking worldview, and their legacy continues to echo through history. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more dark, twisted tales from history.